Well, Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to episode 21 of the Matt the Crick Show. The time has officially come to commence what is one of my favourite discussion topics, my favourite films of 2024. And to celebrate part one, I'm joined by a very special guest indeed. You've never been on the show. I would describe yourself as the theatre equivalent of myself, Matt the Critic. Noah Penn, welcome to the show, mate. Sorry it only took 21 episodes. How are you?
All good. I'm very well, thank you. I've got a. You'll have to excuse the slight cough I've got here and there, but powering through because, as you say, it's been long overdue. This meetup and this experience, shall we say? And I'm very much looking forward to hearing your thoughts on your films of the year. Um, and then hopefully, I'm looking forward to also shedding some light on some theatre as well.
Yeah, it's an industry I've rarely actually, I don't think I've actually covered it on the show, so I thought no better guest to get on than yourself. And I thought it's worth mentioning, Noah, you've got a two monitor setup today because you've got
I hence the back and forth looking.
yeah. It's the first time a guest is trying to avoid making eye contact with me, so I tell you that's cheers for that, mate.
Very good.
Yeah. So you're obviously officially the theatre buff. We actually had a very good catch up at the end of September when it was your sister's wedding. Long overdue catch up, I'd argue. It's great to see you in person again.
hmm
And tell you what, we had some fascinating conversations as to sort of how I think we both view film and theatre in a similar way with terms of our critical perspectives. I think it's
Yeah,
fair to say, if you would agree, we're both equally as vigilant as each other when it comes to our areas.
yeah, I'd say so. I mean, it's I think we agreed that film and theatre are the same in that you might go into some with high expectation, or maybe even you might go into some not sort of knowing what to expect, and you can come out of them going, my expectations were met, if not bettered, but you can also come out of them going, it wasn't great, and I think that's part of almost what is great about both theatre and film, TV, anything that's entertainment based, because it's subjective. If everyone liked the same things, it would all be very boring.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting that people can go into things and come out feeling sort of different to how someone else might have viewed it, and also maybe different to how they thought they might enjoy it. And I think, as you've rightly said, that I think goes for both TV, film, and also theatre.
It definitely does, and I always find sometimes, like, I don't know if you agree on this, the most interesting debates are when you vastly disagree with the majority of what people say.
Yeah,
Because
I'd
it's,
say so.
yeah, having that sole opinion. I've had it a few times this year, or so far already with Nosferatu that came out recently. I was very much in the minority that I didn't particularly care for it that much, but that's yeah, already on the list for potential candidates of overhyped films of the year. So we're starting 2025 very strong. But
Indeed, indeed.
so I'll kick off with some questions for you because it'd be rude for me not to do the Matt the Crick interrogation of guests for the first time. So take us back to where did your love for theatre start, essentially?
Oof, wow. Trip down memory lane. I mean, for as long as I can remember, I've always loved the theatre. I've always felt that nothing beats live entertainment, and that's by no means a disrespect towards TV film. I think the in most cases years of work that goes into TV and film is a lot of the time does come out in the end product, and you can really see the passion that has gone on behind it. But for me, live entertainment and live theatre is just so it's as raw as you can get, and it's something where if someone makes a mistake on the stage, no matter how professional or how new to the job they might be, they have to work with that. They need
Mm,
to, in that moment, go, this has happened. I'm either going to acknowledge it or I'm not going to acknowledge it as a character, but either way, I can't just go, oh, that hasn't happened. Let's work with it. There's no sort of nowhere to hide. And I think that's quite, as I say, this sort of raw experience as a theatre goer that I quite enjoy because you sort of go, well, what makes you a perfect actor is how can you roll with the punches essentially. We're all human. We all make mistakes, and I think it's how you respond to that. In terms of my first love, I think was when my sister Naomi was in a production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which she was in for quite a while, and being an immediate family member, I was dragged along to watch her in those shows. I think initially, from what I can remember, against my will, and wasn't really a fan. But I think as time passed, I sort of thought, okay, music's quite catchy, story's good, it's very colourful, it's very this. Um, and I was hooked from then on, as they say. The rest is history. So there
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah, it's an interesting parallel to how I fell in love with cinema because I used to, as a child, get dragged to a lot of like screenings, sort of
Sure.
against my will. But then I think it was in 2011. I remember it quite well. Like the film that made me click was Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol,
Oh wow, okay.
and since then it's well, the rest is history. Instagram says it all, doesn't it?
That's
That's a
it.
great story. Yeah. That's a lovely story, and I move on to looking at theatre from the past few years. Are there any particular trends you've noticed in theatre for the last 4 to 5 years?
Ooh, that's a good question. Any particular trends? I think I don't know if you call it a trend per se, but I do believe that certainly in the last 4 to 5 years, particularly that British theatre is on the up. Obviously, so my particular fondness of theatre specifically is a bit more towards musical theatre compared to plays and things like that. I'm a big lover of plays and Shakespeare, all your classics and even your contemporary plays, but I've always sort of had a soft spot, particularly for musical theatre, and that will always sort of win me over compared to plays. And because of musical theatre being as big as it is for me, we've always been sort of comparing the West End to Broadway. And certainly, I think over the years, and I'm talking decades, Broadway's always been at the top. Certainly, at least for musical theatre. But as I say, whether you call it a trend per se or not, but I'd like to think in the last 4 to 5 years, British theatre, particularly British musical theatre, has really taken a excuse me, taken a positive turn. I've seen a number of shows which may or may not be featured in my list in those last 4 to 5 years that have been incredible, and they've been British pieces of work that I've gone, you know what? If this is what we can produce in 5, 10 years' time, when you've got even more writers and directors and all sorts of British talent, who's to say we can't not only challenge Broadway, but maybe even take sort of the crown off them, if you will, and sort of go, if you want real musical theatre, proper musical theatre, come to the West End. I'd certainly say that British theatre's on the up. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
I've seen the odd couple of National Theatre live shows in the cinemas before. I think one of my favourites being Prima Facie with Jodie Comer. How that
Mm.
and that is a British production that just happened to go to Broadway. So it's totally like you said. I agree. I think we've definitely got the power. I think to I'd argue match Broadway easily. And like you said, if anything, we're definitely on the route to surpassing it, which is quite an exciting prospect. I would say.
For sure, yeah, definitely.
I
And
mean,
that's a great production you mentioned. I was very, very fortunate enough to watch that one live with Jodie Comer. And it was one of those where you're just in the room and it's just, you can't describe it. It was this one woman powerhouse, and she just absolutely commanded the stage start to finish. And as you rightly say, it's that sort of an example of being that one step towards potentially surpassing
mm.
Broadway, but certainly matching them. Um, I think it went to Broadway because they were jealous between you and me, but there we are.
uh, yeah. Well, it's good. I'm glad to see Kobe get the recognition she deserves more than anything.
Definitely, definitely.
More for her. So I have to ask her now, what are
Mhm.
some of the most, seeing as you're obviously both immersed into our passions, what's the most underrated aspects of theatre you think audiences may not recognise that much?
Ooh, wow! You're coming up with very good questions today, I must say. Underrated aspects of theatre that an audience may not. Okay. Oof. Production wise, I think it's very easy for an audience, sort of your quote unquote average audience member, to rock up to the theatre and go, I want good actors, a good story, and in the case of musical theatre, good songs. And that's not wrong, but I think production wise, the costumes can make such a big difference. The lighting and sound
Mm,
arguably make the show. Without the lighting, without the sound, you're not, I would argue, immersed in that world. It's just this plain nothing. There's no noise. There's no sort of, the lighting to sometimes represent different scenes, different rooms, sometimes to depict different moods. You wouldn't get that feeling that the characters are feeling, for example, if that wasn't there. And I think to sort of broaden that, the idea of how much work goes into a show. I was guilty of it certainly when I was younger, and still catch myself out from time to time, because as an audience member, I suppose the show is designed to just make it a quote unquote easy watch, in
mm,
that you should be
yeah.
thinking about the actors, the storyline, things like that. But when you do think about it, it's an excellent question that you've suggested, that you've put forward. Sorry, that if you sit back and really think, okay, what's gone into this production, what was the thought process behind the lighting and the decisions, and why do I like that, why do I not like that? Likewise with the sound, why have they chosen to go with these costumes? It's set in this period but they look like this, or there's so many things. The set design as well is so important. So I think it's just thinking about, as an audience member, I think what's underrated is thinking about the whole team behind a show, from your costume designers, wig designers, your lighting, sound desk team, all the way through to your actors, your understudies and swings, um, the sort of company managers, stage managers, the whole entire team. Same, I'm sure, could be said for films. It's very easy to watch a film and go, oh, well, this actor was great and the story was easy to follow and blah, blah, blah. But how big are the teams that work on, excuse me, how big are teams that work on these huge productions, these Hollywood productions? I'm sure you know just as well as I do. It's hundreds, sometimes thousands of crew members and all sorts. So it's, I think, just really, I've probably waffled. I'm so sorry,
That's
but
fine.
to try and nutshell that, I think the underrated element that audiences don't think about is just how big of a team it takes to make a show, and maybe giving that some thought when you're reviewing a show or even just watching a show. Just give that extra minute of thought of going, I liked the show, but actually I particularly liked when the lighting did this, when the sound, and how I felt when that happened, or when they walked out in this amazing costume. So just the whole production, not just your sort of basics, as it were.
Yeah, it's very true, as you said, to apply that to film. I think like something I've come to appreciate is that I think obviously my review style's changed a bit, obviously, but now appreciating the broader picture of how many people are truly involved, sorry, in making the production happen. Like one of the best examples I can think of recently was Gladiator 2, which was a film that maybe was lacking a bit of character depth for my liking, but you watch the credits for that film and you see all of those names to make what I would actually describe as an epic production. I mean, that is a definition of a blockbuster. Similarly with theatre, I think you take a back seat and realise how many people have put their heart and soul into this.
Exactly. And you mentioned, of course, about the credits. And that's a perfect example, which you'll have to forgive me, completely skipped my mind. But of course, it's so true. How many times at the end of films do you just see this 5, 10 minutes, sometimes long, of credits, but every single name on that? It's easy to go, oh, it's the credits, I'm going to leave. And as I say, though I hate to admit it, guilty as charged, I've been guilty of doing that. I'm sure certainly in our younger days, we all were, because nothing's really happening. But all of those names are so important, and are just as important as each other. You can have these A-list actors, but who's going to make them look good? The cameraman, the sound man, all these people, they're so important. And you rightly mentioned about when the credits come up, taking that moment to go, yeah, you're great.
Yeah.
You're really awesome.
Yeah. It's appreciating everyone involved ultimately, which I think like just stay for the credit. I always like to stay for the credits. Nobody want to see something by myself, particularly with higher scale productions. Particularly, the only time I don't stay for credits is when I really need a wee and it's a long gas film. There's no interval.
That was me with Oppenheimer. I think it was it was a long film, and I was holding out. I was like, "Come on!"
Yeah, I've had instances where as soon as the credits roll, you just have to get up and run immediately. But yeah,
Yeah,
appreciate all the talent involved ultimately. I think that's
definitely,
the
definitely.
heart of the question. So my
Hmm.
last question before we get on to why we're here,
Hmm.
I'm curious as you've sort of watched theatre grow throughout the years, is there any selective criteria you have when you sort of compare what might be a higher scale production as opposed to like a smaller scale production of theatre? Do you treat them the same, or is there any selective differences?
I think probably as with films, I think any sort of obvious difference that might be sort of immediately obvious would just be budget. But that is very, very rarely a reflection on how good a production is. And again, you could probably say the same about films. I've seen a lot of short films that have nowhere near the scale of production and budget as these sort of big Hollywood films, and yet a lot of the time I sit there going, you know what, this 10 minutes of short film that I just watched completely surpassed this Hollywood blockbuster that I just didn't enjoy. So I think I wouldn't, apart from sort of the obvious, as I say, sort of budget and production value per se, I wouldn't say there's a particular difference in a high scale, or a quote unquote high scale, and a quote unquote smaller scale production. Any production can be an incredible production if the writing's good enough, if the actors are good enough, if the team working behind it are good enough. There's a number of shows that I've seen that are off West End that, budget wise and word of mouth, shall we say, wise, weren't as known, and people sort of thought, oh, I've not really heard of that. Is that any good? It's not really sort of, no one's on social media talking about it and blah blah blah. But I said, well, how do you think these shows and these films get their names? So you got to start somewhere. And I watched them and I thought this is really really good. So I wouldn't say there's particularly any sort of major difference apart from, I say, the obvious of budget. But otherwise, as I said, there's no reason why any production can't be as good as any other. Have I answered that right?
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree on that a lot. I think particularly with I judge all films the exact same, regardless of what their budget is, and there is nothing more satisfying to me sometimes when a low budget film kicks the absolute crap out of a new Marvel movie.
100%. Excuse me.
Yeah, fine. Because yeah, it's Deadpool and Wolverine has got its arse handed to by a various number of independent films this year. Some of which we're about to mention today. So I think that is a nice transition into getting on to why we are truly here. This is part one of the Best of You specials. So I am planning to share with you my top 10 underrated gems of the year. I honestly loved doing this list last year because it's a chance for me to highlight the films that went under people's radars and sometimes, sadly, only get a cinema release for like a week. So the turnaround time is quite tight, obviously, but this is what the list is about. And Noah, do you want to say what your top 10 list is going to be about?
So mine was a bit sort of trickier to do in the sense that it was a lot of a broader time period. So I'm doing the top 10 shows that I've seen from the year 2020 onwards, and that's if the production was started in or around 2020. There might be one on there that I think opened in like November of 2019, which if excuse me, I'll have to double check. I think it's water. It might be vodka. Uh, but so it was hard to pick that list in that sense because I've been fortunate enough to see a number of shows. But I've done that to sort of try and get a bit of a variation, perhaps, shall we say, on over the years of seeing sort of the different types of shows and theatre.
Oh yeah, I'm particularly looking forward to how many picks today we're going to say. I've not actually heard of this pick yet. I don't know,
Sure.
I don't know how small or mainstream you would have gone, but I think I'll let you kick off. What do you want to start with your number 10?
Gosh, okay, pressure's on. I'm starting off. You have to forgive me. I've just written it on my phone. There we go. Wonderful. So number 10, I've gone with, and it is a film as well from the. Oh, you know what? I'm not even going to try and guess when the film came out because I haven't. Guilty as charged. I haven't seen it. But the show was Hello Dolly, and it was the production that was last summer, 2024, and it was starring the incredible Imelda Staunton, Dame Imelda Staunton, I should say. That was on at the London Palladium, and it was, I believe, a 12-week run. Um, there was a lot of, I think it's probably the same for you when you're doing a top 10. 10 is arguably the hardest one to
Yeah,
do
it
because
is. Yeah,
what makes it in just ahead of all the others that
yeah.
might also make it in. And believe me when I say there were a lot of shows that I thought, maybe that was a bit better. Oh no, but um, you could argue it might be a slight case of recency bias. That being said, I fell in love with the production. I went in pretty blind. I didn't really, as I say, I'd not seen the film. I didn't really know any of the songs or the story. Um, Judge me how you want with that, because I know it can be quite well known. But obviously, Imelda Staunton was a big selling point, and I just thought, you know what, it would be great to see her perform live first and foremost, having done some incredible stuff in TV and film, of course. Um, but also, I've heard so many good things about the film, about the show, and I'm very happy I went to see it. It was very feel good. It was sort of your quote unquote golden age of musical theatre, this sort of old style, and it was just great fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I found myself sort of toe tapping in the seat, um, and you could see when you looked around the auditorium, everyone had this big grin on their face. At the end of every song, everyone sort of clapping so loud, and it was it was one of those where people are just happy to be there.
Yeah.
And I think if a production can do that, um, especially given everything that's going on in the world, and with 2024 being the year that it was, with everything going on, for people of all ages, of all backgrounds, to be in this space for two odd hours and all just be sharing in this feel good, lovely, funny show. I thought it was great, and I think that was reflected in both the audience's reactions and the reviews as well overall, which were fairly positive.
Brilliant. That's a good pick to start. I haven't heard of it, so that's already one nil to you.
Okay, ding ding.
Well, I'll kick things off. I might be about to make it 1-1. My number 10, it's as you say again, it's getting these tens is such a hard if because it's always what doesn't make it.
Yeah.
And when you in part two with my actual top 10 list, God, there was about 10 different films I could have. But to kick this number 10 off, my number 10 is a coming of age drama called Diddy. And this is a coming of age story about a 13-year-old Taiwanese American boy who's sort of coming to sense with like high school. There's very much certain topics covered. One of them is including picking up his childhood crush through social media. But there's also he learns how to skate with this new group of people. But most importantly, it's a very natural family drama about love and companionship that Chris has. He's played by Isaac Wong, a young newcoming talent, which I cannot wait to see what he does next. And the mother's played by Joan Chen, and it is two of the best performances I've seen this year. It's a coming of age story that I love because it feels very natural. It's very rare you may experience this maybe in theatre in the sense, but I don't know if you've ever been there where you get a sense you're not watching acting, you're just watching people.
Mm.
You're So I loved Didi. I think it was a very natural drama. It was beautifully written by Sean Wong because I think it never dramatized anything. It just plays every thematical level is played to in a manner that doesn't feel over dramatized. It's very realistic. It feels authentic and it feels like a film that was made from the heart, which is I had an absolute a blast watching Diddy. It was very charming. That's probably the best way to sum it up. But
Yeah.
that's my number 10. It probably one of the nicer films on the list.
That sounds no, it sounds very nice. And you say you sort of you sort of hitting home with the naturalism element. I think it just sounds sweet.
Yeah, it is charming. It's just it's actually very touching in parts, and it's just we don't see many films like it that feel that natural. And I just had to make the list. It was very much it was a fight between this and another film, but yeah, Diddy wins the 10 spot for me.
Oh, very nice.
Do you want
Fantastic.
you're number 9 now?
Yeah, which I'm pretty sure I remember. That's the one. Uh, number nine, is Guys and Dolls.
Oh, I've
Uh,
heard of this.
yes. Okay, there we go. So Guys and Dolls again, same as Hello Dolly. Obviously, also exists as a film. Um, but the production I saw, I loved this because, and quite similarly to Hello Dolly, again, I went in quite blind. didn't really know about sort of much about the film. I knew maybe one or two songs and sort of like a very rough story outline, but I couldn't really tell you much about it. So I thought, you know what, let me just go and watch it. I'd heard very good things review wise. The thing that makes this production stand out, and maybe you could argue it's a bit harsh putting it as low as 9, but I also argue that's maybe testament to the other shows I have on here. But the thing that really made it stand out was the fact that it's an immersive production. So you can have two choices of tickets. You can either book
Oh wow.
regular sort of seated tickets, or you can book standing tickets. And the standing
Oh
tickets
wow.
essentially mean that you're stood on the stage, where the stage is, right next to it. The stage would then sort of be raised at different parts of the show, so to sort of excuse me, to sort of resemble different locations, and you would be sort of this close to the actors. You'd be so close
Wow.
to them, you'd literally feel like you're there. The sort of front of house team were also part of the production, so they wouldn't be sort of dressed in your sort of typical ushers uniform. They'd be dressed in uniform that's part of the production. If you're stood, they'd hand you sort of things that you could sort of wave around and make noises with, like little kazoos and stuff, which again just adds to the immersion. If you're in this sort of party atmosphere, in which there is a scene where they're sort of at a party in Havana, I believe, um, and I was given this sort of like stick to sort of wave around, and I was like, this is great. I feel like I'm part of this party, and I was. So that I think was the sort of major selling point for it. In addition to that, it was very colourful production. It was a very modern take on the show and the film, and just on the story. Um, Incredible actors. Marisha Wallace was a standout for me. Incredible actress who has quite the CV as it is, and that was just another one to add to it. Um, and it was again fun. There are a number of shows on here that I have further down the list that are great shows, but maybe not as sort of jolly, shall we say, on the subject matter. But this was another one that was just so fun, and particularly if you book the standing ticket, you're really having this great time, um, this party atmosphere, and yeah, again, I think it's something that's just quite unique. It's not very often you have the option, the ability rather, to be as involved with the show as Guys and Dolls. So I had to put that on the list because it
Yeah.
was very good fun to be a
Yeah.
part
Yeah. It's really intriguing hearing that because I've never really heard of an experience where you can be that immersed into a theatre show. Have you done it from the perspective of seeing it as an audience member and being on stage, or just being on stage?
excuse me, a bit of both. Obviously, when I went to see it, I was in the standing section, so I was sort of on the stage. But I then did actually, unfortunately, I never got round to it, but I was very much debating going to see it again just from the seated um, section to sort of make sure I sort of essentially tick all boxes and go, okay, it's easy to sort of go, oh, I'm in the show, this is the best show ever, wow. But if I'm actually seated and just sort of watching the show, is it still just as good, or have I just sort of been, what's the word, sort of like coerced into believing it's good just because I'm in the show? As I say, unfortunately, I never got round to it, but the fact that I was already eager to see it again and more than happy to see it sitting rather than stood, and I know a number of people that did see the show sat down. Their comments were exactly the same as mine.
That's good.
It wasn't just the immersive element that made it this great show. It was a great show with again great actors. The sort of say I mentioned how colourful it was, and that's obviously a testament to the lighting team. The sound department did a great job because the immersive element of it. It's this big space. It's hard to sort of get all that sound to travel. You've got it sort of in the round, so you have audience members in this sort of 360 rather than your sort of typical stage, and then the audience are just sat watching. But they got the sound spot on all around.
That's good.
No complaints from me. It was a great production. It really was.
Very good. Yeah. Curious why it's got number 9, but obviously we'll hear why later.
Well, I know. As I'm talking about it, I'm like, oh man, is it too low? But
Yeah.
I've got to stick with it now.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll go for my number 9. This is a lot more of a dramatic turn. This you might have come across this on Sky. This is Kate Winslet's new film Lee.
Yes. Okay, I do know this one.
Oh yeah, it's one still keeps 1-1 then. But
Yes.
this is a biographical warm drama directed by Ellen Kuras in a directorial debut, which is staggering sometimes when you see directorial debuts that already feel from someone who's so accomplished as a filmmaker. This is a project that has been a number of years in the making. I've seen Kate Winslet talk about this various times, and it's essentially a drama on the war photographer Lee Miller. And we sort of see it from the point of view that there's a journalist, Anthony Penrose, who I'm not going to say too much about them because that would go into a little bit of a spoiler territory, who's essentially interviewing Lee Miller. And you might make the argument that that's quite a conventional thing to do in biopics, but in the case of this, I loved how it took a distinctive era of the World War II photography period, and it focused on Lee Miller's tenacity, her determination, what makes her stood out. It didn't have to shout out its points. You could see the determination and grit for this character. Well, this person, sorry. Kate Winslet was absolutely superb. It's one of my favourite performances she has ever delivered. I think it is an Oscar-worthy performance, actually, I would say. Uh, it's just this, it's a really heartfelt piece of storytelling. Because sometimes with true stories, I am fed up of the ones that feel like they're a fact check off Wikipedia. What I mean by that is it takes that period, that period, that period. This is a distinctive true story about someone who is tried to expose the harsh realities of World War II and is not afraid to put themselves on the front line. There's also I'll shout out Andy Samberg who plays David Sherman, a Jewish war photographer who is absolutely phenomenal. It's one of the first. Well, I've seen him in a few comedies. I know he's obviously known for Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but to see this dramatic turn so effortlessly, I absolutely loved. It does something at the end which I know has been divisive of almost maybe creating a little fictionalized ending. I'll put it that way.
Right.
But the way it does it, it actually it gives the film a very different meaning. I can't go into why that happens, but yeah, it's a passion project for me that feels like it's an important watch to obviously be reminded as to history is obviously with World War Two always be brought to reminded of what uh, we've fought through, the monstrosities that occurred. It's I think the cinematographer does a very good job of knowing where to draw the line as to sort of you get the sense of monstrosities, but it doesn't need to be that brutalistic with its violence. But I absolutely love this story. Knew nothing about Lee Miller going in, and I just feel like I learned so much, which is what you want really from a true story.
It's interesting you mentioned that one because obviously it's one I have heard of, which is good. But I actually have been meaning to watch that for months, and I finally sat down to watch it, and I genuinely kid you not, about 3 minutes in, and I can't remember for the life of me what it was, but something happened that caused as a distraction. I had to go and do something, and I never unfortunately got back to watching it. It is still on my planner. I'm still planning on watching. But the fact that it has made your list has made me even more eager to
Yeah.
watch that. So I'm glad you've mentioned it because I've heard nothing but great things about it. And you mentioned about Andy Samberg, how I've obviously only ever known him as this comedy actor, but for him to do this huge switch and do it well, from what I've heard, is quite something.
It's effortless. It is. It's. I almost forgot he was the guy from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So
Well, that's good though. It's testament to
that's
his
yeah, very very good performances. And Ellen Kuras is a filmmaker I think we're going to be watching for years to come. So great to discover new talent as well. So
brilliant.
do you want to go for your number eight now?
Yes, this is a show that I've seen probably about 5 or 6 times. So quite a few, and again, you could argue seeing it that many times, it's only made it to number eight. Um, so this one is called The Choir of Man. And I believe it was on the West End, certainly when I saw it, the run that I saw, around 2012 or just post 2020. But it's actually existed worldwide years before that. It's been on cruises, it's done tours. Um, the premise is very simple. It's an all male cast, and essentially it's 90 minutes. It's the whole way through. There's no sort of interval, no break in between. Almost like a film, if you will,
Yeah.
but maybe a bit shorter. Um, and the premise is essentially it's a lock in at your local pub. Um, it's a jukebox musical, so what that means is it's songs that already exist. The songs aren't written for the show; it's pre-existing ones, which means that people can sing along. It's sort of got your classics like oh my word, 5,000 Miles by the
Yeah.
Pretenders, I believe it is. I'm going to throw myself under the bus there now. I'm pretty sure. And then you've got sort of The Impossible Dream. You've got Waterloo Sunset, to name but a few. It's an incredible soundtrack, um, and the sounds that come out of these men, some of whom are so high pitched, you sort of think, God, wow, that's quite incredible. Some of whom are incredible sort of bassy voices, and the end product is this gorgeous harmony of sound and of just beautiful music that makes being locked into your local not feel so bad. What I particularly like about this production, number of things. Again, it kind of ties into the guys and dolls element. There's sort of an immersive element about it. I wouldn't argue it is a strictly immersive production, but there are like they break the fourth wall a lot. The actors are very
Yeah.
much aware that there is an audience. It's sort of, if someone said to me, "What's the story of Choir of Man?" I'd sort of say, "Well, there isn't really one. It's just the actors chatting to the audience, whilst they sort of have this rough script in their head of just when to sing these songs." Basically, it's a hard one to explain, and it's one of those where you just got to sort of see it to understand it. But it's, again, very feel good. A nice positive is they do hand out some free beers to some lucky. It's genuinely true. I got one the first time I saw it. Then I remembered how much I don't like beer. But a free beer in London, you can't say no.
No.
Uh, you can, prior to the show, you can get a token at the bar, the sort of in the actual theatre bar, and you can use that token in the auditorium to go on stage to get a beer. So they have a genuine working sort of bar and um, tab behind the bar on the stage. And whilst you're there, you can spend some time on the stage. You can look out at the audience. You can chat to the cast members before the show officially gets underway. But they're still in character. They're still talking to you. So it's, I suppose it kind of is immersive, but it isn't your maybe stereotypical immersive show. When the show's actually underway, they only get about maybe 2 or 3 people on the stage, but they still do. While the show's on, they'll go, "You come up, come on, come with me," and it's they get everyone involved, and it makes you feel like you know these people, and it makes you feel like you've known these people for a long time, and to get that feeling, excuse me, to get that feeling across in such a short space of time. You've got 90 minutes to play with,
Yeah.
which in theatre is not. It's an okay amount of time, but if someone said to you that's 90 minutes for the whole show, it's not a great amount of time. And yet in that short space of time, you come out of it going, I feel like I'm saying goodbye to some dear friends of mine because I'm leaving the theatre. They do a great job of making it feel, as I say, so personal and so fun. And as I say, the sing along elements, doesn't matter if you can sing great, doesn't matter if you can't sing at all. Yeah, it's a lock in at your local pub. No one's going to judge anyone, and that's sort of what I love about it. Everyone's friends, and it's a really really great show. It's still running. I strongly
Yeah.
recommend sort of generally to anyone who just wants a nice 90 minutes out in the town to go and see that show. The Choir of Man, incredible show.
Yeah. Sounds really welcoming. It's probably more it's sometimes what you want sometimes to see. Sometimes you could see very serious things and just like a lock in at your local pub and free beers in London. Who can say no to that?
Well, this is it. And I say it's not really sort of your stereotypical show because there's not really a story and there's not really these characters because the characters are just the gents that, excuse me, the gents that are playing them. The first names of the characters are the first names of the actors.
Ah, okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
so it doesn't feel like this typical show that's written for the stage. It just feels like someone's gone, let's just get some lads and chuck them on a stage and sing some songs. But it works, and it works so well. It's been running for a number of years, and as I say, it's done tours all over the world. It still runs on cruise ships, I believe, as well. So it's clearly a popular one for audiences all over. And yeah, it's great fun.
Very, very good choice. Haven't heard of that, but yeah, that's one for the eventual list.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely.
My number eight is Strange Darling.
Oh,
I don't know if it's a name that rings any bells.
I've heard of it. I can tell you much about it though.
This is a thriller that is told in a non-linear fashion, and I'll quickly explain what that. It basically means the story is told in six different chapters, but it starts off with like chapter five, and then it goes chapter two, chapter three, like chapter one. And this is essentially the story of a one night stand gone horribly wrong. And what I love about this is I knew nothing about it going in. So the element of surprise when you were never quite sure of who was playing who. I think the script by JT Molnar does a really good job of making you constantly question who is in charge of this film almost. It's also when the twist does hit you, it manages to do something which I rarely see done well, which is even when you know something's coming because you will have seen it in one of the earlier chapters, it, when the moment actually happens, it hits you like quite hard in terms of the intensity factor. Like it did make my jaw hit the floor. The performances are really great. Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Gallner, particularly their chemistry is quite dazzling, and it needs to be. There's a lot of spicy character drama. A lot of it is actually set in a sort of in a motel room, and a lot of it is their conversations. It's who's leading who is the critical part. Got some very slick camera work as well. It's a very tightly composed thriller that did it, and the ending leaves quite an imprint. It's a very lingering ending. It's one that beckons and goes on for about 5 minutes. Just looking at this one shot. So yeah, it's a wild card film for me this because it just I knew nothing going in. I knew a lot of people had praised it in America, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
That's an interesting concept as well, to sort of a non-linear sort of way of stuck on my words
They
here,
did the
sort of.
rules, you could say.
Yeah, of explaining this sort of. Would you say it was a horror or more
More of a thriller, I'd say.
thriller? Sure, sure. Which is typically built in a linear way because it builds to this sort of big, this build up of, and then there's the big reveal or the big sort of whatever, and you go, oh. But to do that non-linear sounds like quite an interesting concept.
It really was, and it's particularly a testament to like the first 15 minutes because you start on like chapter five, so you start basically in the middle of a big action sequence of this big chase, and you are hooked into it. It's a very good way of diving straight in and just getting you as a viewer hooked immediately. And when you go back and you realise what's really going on, because I think the script's quite there's a lot of ingenuity involved with how it tries to deceive you at times as well, particularly with that opening 15 minutes. Yeah, very tightly executed and a solid thriller. I really enjoyed it. So, you want to go for your number seven,
Happy
mate?
to, yeah. I think if there are any sort of theatre people watching, they'd maybe crucify me for putting it as low as seven because this was certainly last year. Oh gosh, last year, 2023. I lose track of time. Um, this was so highly raved, and I had to put it on the list. Um, I put Sunset Boulevard down at number
Oh
seven.
wow, okay,
Um,
yeah.
this was the production that was directed by Jamie Lloyd, written, of course, excuse me, by Andrew Lloyd Webber. And this starred the incredible Nicole Scherzinger, who did nothing short of an exceptional job in her role, and Tom Francis as well, who was incredible. The whole sort of the main four, how can I word it? The main sort of four actors, as it were, or sort of the main four roles, all transferred with the show to Broadway. So it did sort of so well on the West End that when they got the run, they wanted to keep that sort of original four, that core four, um, to travel over with the show, and they all agreed to it. It was as a theatre show, something that certainly I don't think had ever been done before. What Jamie Lloyd had done, I mean, the direction was what really took it to the next level, and that's credit solely to Jamie Lloyd. He essentially turned it into a film, but on stage. In fact, I think it's something that you would have loved. Um, he had real cameras on the stage that were showing a live feed onto a projection that was being shown at the back of the stage for the audience to see. Sunset Boulevard, story wise, it's hard for me to explain, and this is where this sort of explains why it's as low as 7. I went in completely blind, and I did enjoy it. But I will admit there were some points, and I don't know if that's down to the direction, maybe it's just how it's written, but there were some points where I was a little bit lost on the story. That being said, direction was exceptional, acting was exceptional, the singing, the music, etc., all above and beyond. But in terms of if I had to explain the story, essentially you have an actress who is no longer sort of in her at the peak of her powers, shall we say, because she's a silent movie actress. The world is now moving into movies with sound, and so she's not sort of quite cut out for it. You have an aspiring writer played by Tom Francis, who stumbles across this woman. Oh my gosh, you're this sort of famous woman. I remember you. Yeah, come on, you've got one more in you. And she essentially sort of says, "Well, write me this play, and I'll write me this show, this film, and I'll be in it. You'll have a name for yourself because you'll have me in it. I'm this great actress. It'll work." And she sort of falls for him, and it's sort of love gets involved, and there are other elements at play because people sort of go, "Oh, she's a bit sort of loopy," because shall we say, the years haven't been kind to her. And so there's a lot of sort of depth in that sense to the story. But I wanted to focus more on the direction, and particularly I mentioned the cameras before. There's a particular bit which has always stuck with me right at the start of the show. Tom Francis is playing a writer, and the whole sort of thing is based around film writing, script writing. The camera crew, who are actors in their own right, are walking around with these cameras with sort of lighting on them. And the way, I can't even sort of describe it, it was just so well done. He's sort of behind a wheel that's not connected to anything, but the close-up makes it look like he's just sort of sat in this car. It's black and white lighting, and it's sort of the sun across his face as if he's driving and it's sort of going past a car window, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the camera is on him, super close on the stage, which you can see. But then you look in the background where this projection is, and you see sort of the end product, and it's him in this car, and they've got it proper film style, Sunset Boulevard, starring Tom Francis as, and it's just, you look at that and you go, that's not theatre, that's film. And yet here we are watching it in a theatre, and it was so, as I say, so unique and so fresh and new, and I think that was what really got critics talking. It was incredible as a production, and as I say, I thoroughly enjoyed it. The whole crew, the whole team, start to finish, were incredible. I've got very, 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 very little, if anything, bad to say about it. So I know I mentioned before the story, and it might just be me, it might be how it's written, I don't know. The story, at times I got a little bit lost, but that's very, very quickly coated over by everything else that's great about the production, and it had to make the list.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it sounds definitely sounds like something I probably would have loved as a.
And when you can, it's a short flight to New York, and you get tickets on Broadway. It's still showing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that. Just to rub.
Yeah,
No,
short.
only just yeah. No, don't worry about the jet lag, any of that. Just
No,
take
no,
a day
no.
off and yeah. Nah, yeah. I heard about Sunset Boulevard when the hype was going on, but I don't really know anything about it. Again, obviously only from what you've told me, but no, that sounds really good. I'll go for my number 7 because we had this set rule we weren't going to talk long, and we've already spoken so long
I know.
as we can.
I know
It's,
I have a habit of waffling.
that's fine.
I feel like you've been quite concise and stuff on yours.
That's what I love. That's what I love about the podcast. We're passionate people, and this is what the lists are about. So I'm going to go for another non-linear told film at number seven. My number seven is The Outrun. This is a new Saoirse Ronan movie. This is a essentially the story of a young adult Rona, who Saoirse Ronan plays, and she's struggling to come to terms with her troubled past of alcoholism, and sort of she's an addict essentially. Uh, and she returns to sort of like this Scotland's Orkney Islands as essentially as like a healing retreat, so she can
Mhm.
try and overcome her addiction to alcohol. And I absolutely loved the non-linear storytelling more so than Strange Darling because it didn't feel on the nose. We were jumping back and forth quite a lot, almost to a point where I could see it being a turn off for people because they don't really know what point they are at in the story. Uh, I like how it's a very chaotic film at times. I think particularly with the lighting design when you actually there's a sequence at a club that the way they use the lighting to show how out of control the situation has become for this alcoholic is really quite something. I always find it fascinating watching performers play drunk so well because
Mm.
it is a very convincing talent that well, particularly Saoirse's case, she's really able to convey convincingly. I found the dialogue really realistic. I found it authentic. I thought it was very genuine at times. I thought more than anything, it's a hard film to watch because there was a lot of scenes where you just sort of want to take the bottle away from this character. That's a testament to how good I think the writing is. The actual author who wrote the Outrun book is one of the screenwriters of the film, which I think adds another layer of legitimacy because well, it's coming from there. We know the adaptation's pretty going to be pretty faithful, but I found it utterly life affirming actually because I felt like I'd been with this character for I think it was about 2 hours, and I'd seen their recovery, and I was so fulfilled by it. It was actually a very lovely film to watch at times. As much as I found it to be a very hard watch, particularly, I mean, the technical team deserve all the credit for because the moment Saoirse Ronan's character breaks and reaches that point where she's like she can't cope anymore, and just this club scene is absolutely brilliantly portrayed. I, I thought it's just really authentic. Going back to maybe what I said about Dee Dee, it's a film where it's heartwarming, and love Saoirse Ronan as a performer. I think she's one of our greatest talents this decade. And there is another film she released this year, sorry, last year, that I will be mentioning on part two of the podcast. So little prompt for that.
We are.
But yeah, absolutely loved it.
Oh, brill.
Yeah, I normally find with alcoholic stories they can normally just sometimes be a bit repetitive, but this did something quite unique. It had that very distinctive appeal where it's telling its points, but it's also being a very stylistic movie.
Mm.
There's probably maybe some of the part White said in at number seven because there's a lot of reference to a woman's relationship with nature, particularly when she's within the islands. That and maybe that I didn't get as much, but it's a very small nitpick in what I think is a very authentically made drama. So that is my number seven, and we will. Should we go to number six? Should I kick it off for a change?
Take it away, number
Okay,
six.
number six. This is something I watched over Christmas. This is a Netflix original called The Shadow Strays.
Okay.
And this is essentially an assassin who goes by the code name of 13. She's this young 17-year-old assassin, and gets suspended at the start of the film due to this mission in Japan that goes south. And then, as she's decommissioned, she meets this 11-year-old child called Monji, who actually loses his mother. I'm not going to say why, but it almost turns into a rescue mission of rescuing the boy and almost a redemption story for the assassin 13. And this is to me an Indonesian version of Taken, that where I have to say I find in Indonesian action films compared to American action films, the physicality of the performances are off the charts good because the way they move and is just like you're watching this immense dance choreography. It's just like at times I was just like, how the hell do you move like this? Aurora Ribeiro, who plays 13, is absolutely fantastic. It's one of her first feature films. Very natural talent who I think we're going to look back on it for years to come. This was also directed by the same director who did another Indonesian film I love called The Night Comes for Us, which is also available on Netflix. And
One, yeah.
yeah, it's same director, but yeah, it's just it is a film where you really feel pain when the knives get stabbed through someone. I believe that it
Sure.
which is quite a hard thing to do, I think. Like because there were
Yeah.
points where the violence, I was like, crikey, this is one of the most violent films I've watched this year. But a, I think the violence is kind of justified when you see. I think it reflects. It's a very good character choice. Oddly, actually, I think metaphorically, I think you could almost apply it. There's a lot of rage going into how violent these knives are being plunged into people. I like as well. It's 2.5 hours, but it doesn't ever drag. It's a very fast-paced drama. I mean, when those action scenes start, you're like, when are they going to stop? And every time they do stop, you're like, okay, just take a breather before the next one. And then the final fight is just, it's chef's kiss. It's absolutely superb, this film. Enjoyed the absolute heck out of it. I always find it quite hard when you compare sort of entertaining films to like very serious drama films, but I have to push my entertainment at the forefront here. It was absolutely superb. One of Netflix's best originals this year for sure, and I probably will rewatch it. Definitely one of the more rewatchable ones, I'd say. So that is my number six.
Oh, very nice. Sounds. I like the sound of that one.
Yeah,
I know you like your action sequences as well. You.
there was a lot in this I could place out, pick out, I'd say, for the best of year fights. Yeah, I think the final fight might take the final fight of the year, in all fairness.
Number six for me, I've put a show called Crazy for You.
Okay, I haven't heard of this, right?
It's
Sell it.
probably a lesser known show in general. I hadn't heard of it. It was on at the Gillian Lynn Theatre. The show was originally, I believe, written by Gershwin, and it's how can I describe it? It was probably actually quite similar to how you mentioned with the one you just mentioned, with it being this sort of 2 to 2.5 hour long show, and yet at the same time, none of it drags. You're just
Yeah,
the whole way through. You're like, this is great, this is great. Oh, what? It's over. It's a feel good show. It's sort of your classic case of mistaken identity. So it sort of goes down that comical route of that, which I think is sort of quite used a lot in Shakespeare as well. So it's obviously over the centuries is a as a winning formula for comedy. A classic case of mistaken identity. Um, it starred the incredible Charlie Stemp, who excuse me, has also been in. He's been in a number of shows. He was Bert in Mary Poppins when Mary Poppins was on the West End in its most recent production, and he's done. I think he was also in. Oh, typical. I asked me all of this and I could say like that, but as soon as I'm asked to remember, I believe it was Half a Sixpence, but don't quote me on that. And he's done a number of ensemble roles as well. But he is incredible, and this, in my opinion, is his magnum opus so far as an actor. He holds the audience in the palm of his hand, brings them along on this incredible journey. We laugh with him. We at times feel for him. Um, I was going to say cry with him, but we don't really cry. It's the whole thing is just funny, feel good. The dancing, I mean. incredible. It has probably the best dance number that's ever closed an act one, in my opinion. It's this 8 minute long song that just goes on and on and on, and yet at the same time feels like it doesn't move at all.
Mm.
Um, and there's probably in that 8 minutes, there's probably about six and a half where it's just dancing, like no singing. It's just the
Oh
music in the
wow.
background, dancing to it. The tap was immaculate, and some of it was so sort of unique. They're like tap dancing on pickaxes, and they're using pickaxes as like swings. There's moments when they're using like serving trays as modes of it's incredible. I can't sort of I could spend all day talking about the dancing
Yeah.
and how incredible it was. Um, I just loved again the feel good factor of it, which I know I've mentioned in previous shows on the list, but it was probably the most feel good of the feel good shows on my list because of the energy that it brought. It's probably the most feel good show out of all of the feel good shows that I've got on my list because of the energy that was in it. Um, it's let's say it's this good comfortably 2 hours long, and yet all of the actors, day after day, I had the privilege of seeing it a number of times, and every time I saw the production, it wasn't like, oh, it was a bit better that time. It was a bit, you could tell they were a bit more up for it. No, every
Oh,
single
that's
time,
good.
all the energy, and it, as I say, with all the dancing that's in it, and there's so much sort of physical theatre as well, because there's a lot of physical comedy, slapstick, things like that. They still keep the energy 100% every show, every night. It was a demanding show, and it was just incredible. Colourful costumes, clever set. Um, I couldn't fault it. It was so funny. And again, it was one of those where it's sort of this golden age, a golden era, shall we say, quote unquote, of musicals, where it was probably written some 80 years ago, maybe, and yet still the comedy works. And that's a testament to the writing, of
Yeah.
course, a testament to the music. Um, it was brilliant, really, really brilliant.
That's a brilliant pick. Absolutely
Yeah.
superb. So we're going to move on to the top fives. Obviously, by that very lengthy discussion of 10 to 6, I'm very intrigued to see what we're going to make to our top fives. But so my number five is another Netflix original, and it is Joy on Netflix. This is directed by Ben Taylor. I believe it another directorial debut, which is staggering. We've got three different medical professionals involved. We've got G. Purdy, Bob Edwards, and Patrick Steptoe. Thomas and Mackenzie, James Norton, Bill Nighy star in this. What I think is an absolutely phenomenal uh, telling of this story. Interestingly, if I were to compare it to Lee and say one of my biggest problems is that true stories can feel like they're jumping between facts of a certain time period. This takes place over the span of 10 years, which is quite baffling, and it opposes everything that I just said as to why I sometimes hate true stories. Because this is an incredibly British film in the every sense of the word. It's incredibly heartwarming, it's life affirming, it's so educational, and there are certain lines of dialogue that just are so thought provoking. There's a particular instance where Bob Edwards is actually on one of the TV shows, and just a line that he says just absolutely floored me when he says, "Everyone should have the right to have a baby," and no one paid attention to it. It's the little nuances I quite liked in this film of how dialogue, simple lines can mean so much in this context of things. I thought you actually got to learn so much about the pioneers involved themselves. I think that three of performers are absolutely superb. Awards worthy performances for sure. I think there's a certain vulnerability Thomas and Mackenzie brings to Gene Purdy that is captured at its essence when it's needed to. Bill Nighy, he's one of our best. He's just an absolute. I know you obviously mentioned Imelda Staunton, similar to her, just an absolute delight to watch on screen. And Norton, I've only ever really ever known if you've. I don't know if you've seen Happy Valley at all, but
I don't actually know.
I've only ever known him to play the bad guy, so it was quite nice to see him playing a very nice guy. I know he's got a new ITV drama out. I think it's tonight, Playing Nice, which I really want to see. But yeah, this is also written by Jack Thorne, and he's one of my favourite British writers. He did the COVID drama Help with Jodie Comer and Stephen Graham, that was also made my top 10 of that year, because it was, he writes from the heart and he writes empathetically, and there's such a compassionate nature to his work. And Joy is just such a remarkable true story. I learned so much watching it, which is obviously why we watch true stories, but I also was just, I was floored by how it sometimes it reveals the facts at the end of true stories and stuff that the film didn't cover, but just remarkable. I didn't know anything about this, and the actual scene where the test tube baby is born is just is it's just so charming. It's so British, this film, in every sense of the word, but I mean, heck, I don't care. It's British and it's number five. I love this film. I think I put it on the list because I know a lot of people may have heard of it, but it's not been spoken about in any awards conversation, which just it just breaks my heart. Like, I know you can only pick 10, but give us some love at least.
I definitely need to give that one a watch, and a
Yeah,
strong cast as well, as you mentioned.
yeah. It's just yeah, the Three Forties are excellent. Thomasin McKenzie, I think, deserves to be in the Best Actress conversation. She is, I think she's about 21 or 22, and her career is just like, she's been in Last Night in Soho. She did an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Her trajectory is huge, and I can't wait to see what she does next. Might be my favourite performance of hers, actually. I'd say I'd probably go out on a limb on that, but yeah, I loved it.
Oh, brilliant. Amazing.
Yeah, brilliant.
Um,
You want to go for your number five?
yeah, so I've put a show called Police Cops the Musical.
Okay.
Uh, it was, I believe it's the only off West End show that I've put on here. Um, and it was at the Southwark Playhouse for a limited time. As I say, off West End, so it didn't have your sort of typical sort of high budget that a lot of West End shows do have. Um, this was one of the funniest things to this day that I have ever seen, ever, by a mile. The writing was brilliant, and the team who wrote it, ironically enough, are called Police Cops. That's the name of their like group. And I believe I read that they were a bit sort of torn between, should we do a musical, because musicals are sort of what's quite big in the West End and would maybe sort of put our name on the map. And I think one or two of the members of the team were sort of, oh, I can't sing, don't really want to do it. Anyway, they went ahead with it, and thank goodness they did, because it was just brilliant. Hilarious. How can I describe it? It's essentially, the whole thing is just a silly concept. This character is aiming to be, I think Jimmy Johnson, I think is his name. It's like a very sort of stereotypical American, set in the 80s, and he is just aiming to be the best police cop ever. That's it. That's the premise.
Mm.
It's hilarious. There's so many running gags. I just think it's so well written. The music is hilariously written. The show as a whole. I think for me, the thing that just got me was just the level of running gags and stuff. There's an element of audience participation as well. Um, Without me going on just this incredibly long rant that could just be waffling, it's just clever. It's funny, it's clever, and you mentioned about Joy. It's British. It's so, even though it's set in America and it's very sort of American stereotypes, um, you could tell the writing and the team behind it. It's so British, and that's what I think is what is really great about it, and I think what maybe helped me and a lot of the audiences resonate with it, because you go, oh, yeah, that's funny, because Brits find that funny, or Brits find this stereotype. And it's nothing, I should point out, it's nothing ever sort of too offensive. It's solely, it's just sort of your borders of comedy. If that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. We'll go with it.
Yeah.
And it's just brilliant. It really, really is. And I really hope that it's not the last that we see of it, because it was very well reviewed, and I say it was off West End. Who knows? It might be brought to the West End in the future. Fingers crossed. I think it worked in a small setting. I think that helped with the intimacy of it. But we'll see. It was very, very funny. Very, very funny.
I love that. It's a very good underrated gem pick that because it's well we got you out of London for that police cops.
Well, essentially, yeah. Where it was only just, but
Yeah, we'll say it was just for the purpose of recording. I'm gonna yeah that sounds really good. Really yeah we've got parallels with our picks I've noticed. There's a little bit of odd nuggets I've noticed that like the there's Britishness, there's been contained films, there's been a bit of everything, but I'm gonna let you, whilst you've still got a voice, go for number four. 'Cause number four is where it gets a little bit interesting for me. I'll put it that way.
yes. And I will say that probably I was looking at the list now, probably with the exception of the first one. My next three are where we've had a lot of sort of lightheartedness and comedy. This is where it gets much more dramatic and
Eh,
I don't want to use the word depressing, but darker, shall we say? And that's, I mean, the shows that I've put were nothing short of incredible, and they won a lot of awards, nominations for things. So the one I've got at number four is a show called Next to Normal.
Okay.
It originally started out on Broadway and then eventually moved over here. Um, excuse me, and it was another show that I went in pretty blind to. A friend of mine said that she loved it. It was like her favourite show. She was like, "You have to go see it. I'll come with you. We're watching it. Let's go." I knew it was good because the reviews were pretty positive. But that was it. I didn't really know the story. I didn't really know anything. Thank God I went. It was incredible. Tears in my eyes come the end of the show. It's a story of a mother who is suffering with bipolar disorder. Um, Without me sort of giving too much of the plot away, she has a family that she's obviously having to tend to. It's her and her husband and her kids, but she's battling this very serious disorder. It's sort of it's as serious as it can get. This bipolar disorder. In addition to that, she's combating anxiety, depression at a severe sort of level as well. And it's sort of how the family cope with that, how
Yeah.
they try and live normal lives while she's sort of almost in her own life, in her own world. You mentioned a few films ago about the beauty of the naturalism was the reason why you put it on the list,
Yeah.
and how we were discussing that sometimes you feel like you're not even watching the actor, you're just watching people. This it straight away made me think of this show. When you said that, I thought, oh, when I mention this show, I'm going to mention that, and it felt like I was just watching a family that were going through a tough time, but the acting was so good. I mean, so a lot of the time you can go, acting was good, but this person in particular, but this, the whole, and it's only a small cast. I believe it's about six people.
Oh well.
Um, all of them did their job to a T. That you couldn't really single anyone out. I think a lot of people will single out Casey Levy and Jack Wolf. Casey Levy, who's the mother, and Jack Wolf, who plays the son. Jack Wolf, I believe, was his sort of West End debut. So at a young age, it's right to single him out because at such a young age, he still did such an incredible job. Barely took any shows off. He had, I think, like I don't know, like a very small handful of shows where he wasn't on. He did all of the others, and he was incredible. And Casey Levy, who's won awards in America, so was always going to be sort of quite highly anticipated. And she was, excuse me, she was absolutely incredible. But as I stressed, as was the whole company, it was heart wrenching. It, it tugs at heartstrings. It makes you think. It makes you sort of appreciate the finer things in life. Sometimes something as simple as, wow, my mum remembered this. Wow, my dad remembered that, or whoever, whatever it is, because this family are going through things where sometimes that isn't the case, and you see how they respond and how they react to that. It was such a naturalistic piece of work that was just gorgeous in every level. Was a tough watch at times, but that's solely down to the writing and the actors. Um, it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. That's all I can really describe it. Just
Yeah. Yeah, never heard of that till now, but yeah, it's a true testament of a true gem. It sounds like, and
Mm.
I love the
They,
sense of yeah,
they've recorded it. They did a pro shot of it, so it's hopefully going to be streamed similar to like National Theatre at Home. So you hopefully might be able to see it
yeah,
soon. We don't know what platform, we don't know when, but fingers crossed soon enough.
yeah, yeah, definitely for my sake, because I know you're going to be on my arse about seeing it now.
It was very good.
No, so definitely one I'd like to see, especially for the whole point of it. Obviously, you said about the naturalistic, so I get the words out aspect. Uh, yeah, I something I always love. I'll go for my number four. This is where it gets interesting. I'll put it that way because I have broken the rules here because well, I don't care. So throughout the year, I have been fascinated by this actress's journey. So the actress is Daisy Ridley, who you will obviously know best. Did you ever see the new Star Wars films?
So yeah.
Yes. Well, okay, we're doing well there. Brilliant. And then it kind of went a bit. Well, I think a few of them have kind of gone a bit off the radar, and I hadn't seen Ridley really do anything till this year. But I have to say, she's had a comeback of a year. So my number four is what I'm going to call the Daisy Ridley comeback year. And all of the films she's released this year, I've popped into this number four slot. So I'll start where I'll start of which one I watched first. And so the first film was Sometimes I Think About Dying, and this was essentially Daisy Ridley plays this very awkward office worker. She's very she lives in solitude almost. Doesn't really speak to anyone. You like see her in office meetings. She's very silent, and she, she daydreams about what it's like to if she died. But here's the whole thing. It oddly it's really life affirming, and it's a film. Well, you described this remote to normal. You appreciate the finer things in life. One of my favourite moments from the film was her and another worker bonding in a diner over a slice of blueberry pie, and they said how bad the film was, and they watched it in the cinemas, but they actually it was the first part of the night they both enjoyed. And it was the little moments that made this. Rachel Lambert does a really good job with keeping it in a strong sense of realism. That it's a very low budget film. It's probably the best of the four Ridley films I'm about to talk about, but it's she is an actress I've come to realize now knows how to say she knows how to say so much with just her eyes.
Mm,
Her eyes and facial expressions say so much.
mm.
It's yeah, I loved that film. I'll talk about the next one now. I feels like I'm cheating, but
All right.
it feels like I wanted to give her the recognition she deserved because I've really
Cool.
enjoyed seeing her journey. So next one I watched was it's on Disney Plus actually. It's Young Woman and the Sea. And this was a true story about the first ever woman, Trudy Edinburgh, who swam the English Channel.
That's right. Yeah.
And it stars Stephen Graham, Christopher Eccleston, Bodnia, who was in Killing Eve. But it's odd because it's an American true story that feels very British at its core because it's really heartfelt. I knew nothing about this story at all going in. Similar to Joy and Lee, I came out, I was absolutely floored by the story. I mean, how they actually filmed when she does swim the English Channel, it was like, even when you know something's going to happen, it's like edge of your seat, nail biting tension. Ridley's
Mm.
absolutely brilliant in capturing the tenacity of what Trudy stood for, I think, more than anything. But yeah, that was a really good one. I'm going to talk about probably what is one of my favourite thrillers of the year called Magpie. And this would have been possible without the other film, which I'll also mention, called The Marsh King's Daughter. Magpie is was based off a story that Daisy Ridley had when working on The Marsh King's Daughter, where she was working alongside a young actress called Joey Carson, who was with her father. And the whole perspective of what Magpie is, it's a story about this couple's lives are thrown into almost this disarray of chaos when their daughter gets a job on a major move. I think it's a commercial, yeah. But so the father takes the daughter to set, but the father starts to fall for this other actress on set, and it becomes this wonderfully wicked game of deception where Ridley in this is almost having to create such a perplexing performances. And what I mean by that is her character is a very good example of an enigma where you don't know where she stands on anything until the very last 5 minutes. And I absolutely love this. It's a type of drama that knows exactly what it needs to be. I think it's actually written by her husband, Tom Bateman, which is even more fascinating. I think the atmospheric tension is just unnervingly spellbinding because you're never quite sure what path you're being led down. There's a toxicity that is almost like a looming threat that hangs effortlessly throughout this whole film. It's directed by Sam Yates. He brings us very much talk about this with Strange John, a slickness. Nothing's ever over dramatized. It tackles isolation again, similarly to Sometimes I Think About Dying. Ridley steals the film again. I'm gonna say she has just gone on this power surge for me. Of this, she knows how to create like isolated performances of what it's like for a character, a woman, to be in solitude, but also say so much at the same time. I Magpie was incredible. Marsh King's Daughter was the one I watched afterwards because I sort of wanted to see how I was fascinated by the fact that the story of Magpie came from Marsh King's Daughter. Marsh King's Daughter is a very similar premise to, I don't know if you've seen or heard of Where the Crawdads Sing,
No.
but it's essentially this. It's quite okay. It's probably my least favorite of the four, but I really appreciated it for what it had to say on Survivor's Guilt. Ridley again is absolutely mesmerising in the lead role. It's quite a tight knit thriller. I particularly enjoyed the opening sequence with the younger character that she's playing, Helena, because it's very much a case. They live in a very remote part of like the forest, but she's got a very bad upbringing from her father, and a lot of the film becomes her escape, and it's survivors living with survivor's guilt. So it tackled that really well. But yeah, to save me rabbiting on now, the Daisy Ridley comeback quadrilogy, if you would call it that, is my number four, and I think they all deserve a special mention because I enjoyed watching all four, to be honest.
Quite good range from the sound of it as well.
Rage, yeah, particularly where, yeah, because I think Younger Than the Sea is like is probably the lightest of the four. I think Magpie is very cleverly written, probably the best written of the four. But there's bits to all four I love, so it felt wrong not mentioning. And I was already thinking I wanted to do the tie anyway, coming in, and I was like, I couldn't decide on the mag, so I just thought I'll put them all at number four because I really enjoyed all four. Ridley has made the comeback of the year in my eyes. I don't think anyone else, if you're looking at body of work this year, I think she's got the best. Well, she's had the most, definitely one of the most. But yeah, lots to say on how much I love all four. So
Nice.
yeah, that was quite a long tangent there.
That was good. I liked it.
Yeah, I always tie when I know it's got purpose behind it. So yeah, I'll give myself a bit of a break there. Do you want to go for your number three?
Yes, number three was quite close with number four, but I put it ahead, not solely, but a big factor was the fact that it's based on a true story. Um, so my number three is The Little Big Things,
Okay.
uh, British musical, and it's about the life of Henry Fraser, who, when he was, I want to say 17, certainly in his teens, late teens, went on a trip with his brothers, his older brothers. Unfortunately, had an accident, and it left him paralysed from the neck down. Prior to that, he was sort of like a rugby prodigy. He had, his whole life ahead of him. So this sort of tragic accident happens, and his whole life sort of turned upside down, and you think, well, it sounds like it's tragic, but it sounds like a good premise for a show, and then you are told this actually happened and it's real life, and you sort of think, oh wow. Um, the the production was at Soho Place. It was an in the round, so the audience was sort of surrounding the stage. Um, it was staged beautifully. The cast were great. There was great sort of inclusivity in the cast. Obviously, he's in real life. Henry Fraser is say paralysed from the neck down, so he's very much bound to a wheelchair. So there was a wheelchair actor who was portraying Henry Fraser. You had a number of other actors and actresses who were who perhaps weren't able-bodied that were still in the production, and I know a lot of um, sort of shows and films, whatever, might not always sort of go towards that. They go, oh, we need someone able-bodied because X, Y, and Z. So it was very nice to see a very diverse company in every sense of the word. It was incredibly diverse, and they were all incredible. They weren't just sort of doing it to tick a box. They fit the roles perfectly. Excuse me. It was, again, heartwarming as well as heart-wrenching. I was going to say gut-wrenching, but heartwarming as well as heartbreaking, shall we say. It was equal parts beautiful and horrible, but in the nicest way. It was just this real story of life, and again, it was just, you find yourself sat there, quite similar to Next to Normal. You find yourself sat there and you sort of are really just in your mind going, well, I'm really thankful for this in my life, and I'm really thankful for that, because it makes you realise just how fragile life can be. And even if you do have a situation like that in life, what you can still make of it. There are moments in the show, I'll try not to spoil too much, but there are moments in the show where Henry's character is very much sort of, this is it. I can't be a rugby player anymore. I'm just reduced to this. I can't use my body. Blah blah blah. What's the point? And then he's got the support of his friends, the support of his family, and then sort of his internal monologue as well, if you will, where he's sort of going, okay, I can't do this, but I can still do this. I can do that. I can still use my brain. There's so many things that my brain can do. And I'm pleased to say that now in the real world, and as is depicted in the show, he's a painter. He uses his mouth to paint, which is incredible. It's a specialised pen that sort of was specifically designed for him, that sort of fits in his mouth, and he can sort of use it to paint. I mean, it's incredible how it works, and how he's used what was such a tragic event to his advantage to still sort of make good with his life. It's obviously quite a brave thing to turn that into a show, to share that story with such a large audience, but it's one that I'm very thankful he did. It brought me it brought my attention, sorry, to the show, and to his story, I should say. I have a piece, not in this room, but upstairs. I have a piece of his work, which is probably my favourite of his. It's a King Penguin, which again he painted, and I think it's just incredible piece of storytelling. The fact that it's based on the true story as well is just makes that extra sort of bit of, let's say, heartbreaking, but so heartwarming at the same time. You leave the show thinking, this is what life can be about. The support of friends and family and loved ones around you, making the most of what you're given. If that means you're an able-bodied person and you can do all this, that, and the other, great. If it means that you can't necessarily do things that able-bodied people can do, you've still got all these other tools at your disposal, and you've got all this support network around you. Do this, do that, and it opened your eyes to the potential of humans. You look at this guy and you think, he's paralysed from the neck down. What can he do? We're humans. We can do anything if we really put our mind to it. This guy's a painter, and a great one at that, and he uses his mouth. I mean, how incredible is that? And it was just incredible. So it was beautifully portrayed on the stage, and that's credit to the actors, the writing, which Henry, I believe, had a big part in, the lighting at some points, which sort of really helped set the mood. The music was gorgeous. It was just incredible. Very,
Yeah.
very big fan.
I know. I'm just looking at Henry Fraser's work. It's unbelievable.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's incredible. All that just with his mouth. It's remarkable what he
Oh,
can do,
that's
and as a whole, what humans can do.
yeah, that sounds genuinely incredible.
Mhm.
It's anything that changes your perspective and makes you look at life differently. I think it's a rare luxury, but it's a rare privilege almost that
Mm.
film, TV, and theatre can provide us. So that's a dynamite of a pick. That is,
That was always my top three. It was just
yeah,
where it would go.
yeah. I I'll get into my top three. They could flip on any given day to be honest because they're all very close to each other. So I'm going to go from my number three. I don't think you would have heard of this. It's called Monolith. A lot of people at home may be also thinking, "What the hell has he just said?" So Monolith, when I describe the film, it is a film that is made for me. So it is a science fiction thriller about a podcast journalist played by Lily Sullivan, who was also in recently in Evil Dead Rise. She's got this podcast called Beyond Believable, and she's almost investigating this mystery behind some bricks. And this is really when we're talking about limited budget. She's the only character on screen for the whole film. You're
Wow.
watching this podcaster. You obviously hear voices of the people she's interviewing, and Lucy Campbell does such a good job writing because she keeps the film hanging on such a loose thread where you as a viewer are sort of questioning what is happening on the other side of the screen that we can't see. We can only hear what's going on. And dare I say, as a podcaster myself, I mean, I absolutely love this film. It's made for me. I saw it like in April when I sort of, so I'd done a good, like at least 10 podcasts by this point. And it was a fascinating idea actually for a sci-fi film because in a lot of films I've seen the podcast, they almost act as like a B or C strand of narrative where we occasionally might cut to it. I know in Hollywood we do that quite a lot. There's podcasts they exist within the films, but we don't ever see it at the forefront. I loved how it made the podcast at the forefront because the whole time you're watching Lily Sullivan's and narrative arc is incredible because you're watching this wanna be aspiring journalist go on this power surge and almost deceptive guilt trip of almost manipulating the footage to get what she wants. And it's the little nuances like when she's editing a podcast, making something sound slightly different by cutting someone off. I loved how much that said about a character. It
Ah.
was absolutely fascinating. It ends on a rather ambitious note, I'll put it that way, as to what was really going on. The last 10 minutes are a little bit of a 180 from what the rest of the film is about, but I don't care because I still dug it. Lily Sullivan is, I mean, when with only character on the screen, you need someone to hold. They need to be the glue that holds this together. Lily Sullivan is absolutely brilliant in the film. I wasn't the biggest fan of her. Well, I'd say her performance, but I wasn't a big fan of Evil Dead Rise too much. I think she came out of it well, but I thought the film was correct. But this was like, wow, you've just scaled it back and you've just told a very simple story, and it is absolute. Honestly, I've never known podcast interviews to be so nail biting
Mm.
because in your head you're trying to piece what is going on the other end of the line, but Matt Beasley does a really. He never cuts away from the house, so you're always left hanging as to whatever she hears is what we hear. Whatever she thinks is what we think as well. We never get. It's a film that, I'll say this final point. It plays its cards well because you know as much as the character, you don't know any information ahead of the character, and that is a
Right.
very rare luxury. You know
Yeah.
exactly what the character knows, and that information stays constant throughout. I am one of the highlights of the year, and I'm gutted I didn't see this in the cinemas. I watched it on my laptop. I'm so gutted this didn't get a wide release. I mean, I probably would have been the only person who went to see it, but yeah, absolutely amazing film.
Oh,
Oh,
real.
I want to say, oh yeah, well, this is how good the top three are because I've got so much to say. It delves into this really good point as to what we make a spectacle and what the hysteria behind like you see something trading on X. It's like it's it has a really good subtextual point as to what spectacle means for someone, and I
Mm.
love that point. I loved it. Absolutely superb. So much to take away from it. Such a simple premise that is just so much complexity to it. Making the most of your resources. Yeah. So you
Yeah,
almost think
definitely.
you almost think why I didn't put that as number one now.
Well, no, well, I
Yeah.
look forward to what number one is.
Yeah. But that's my
That's
number three. Yeah.
oh,
Heck of
brilliant.
a yeah. It's ambiguous, but it needed to be. Yeah. Do you want
Right.
to go for your number three? Two, sorry. Are we on two?
Yeah, yeah, number two, yeah.
Yeah.
So
No.
I've done The Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
I've seen the film.
Yeah, there you go. So you know the story then already, and I've not seen the film. So but I have seen the show, and I do need to go watch the film now because the show I fell in love with. I've put it number two for a number of reasons. Firstly, Claire Foster. I mean, give this woman every award going. She was immaculate in her role. She reduced me to tears on multiple occasions, which is no easy feat, I should stress. Um, but she was her connection to both the characters on stage, but also with the audience, us feeling what she's feeling, was incredible and something I very rarely feel in the theatre. A lot of the time you can resonate with a character and stuff, but I really felt like I was feeling exactly what she was going through throughout the show. I was like, I get that and I feel your pain, or oh, that's hilarious. I feel your laughter with that. I feel your joy. Um, for anyone that doesn't know the story of The Curious Case Benjamin Button, it's essentially the story of a man who is born as an old man and ages in reverse, and ends his life as a young boy. Oh, excuse me. It's a faultless production. What I think really made it stand out was the actor musos. So every single actor in the show is an actor musician. They can all play multiple instruments, and they do that throughout the show. There's no band in an orchestra pit. All of the songs that are played live on their instruments on the stage in front of you, and they're singing as well, and they're dancing, and they're the characters. It was just incredible. Something that is very rarely seen in the West End. Again, it's British theatre, so it's a huge testament to that. Um, I just think it was so beautifully told as a story. It's easy to sort of, I think it's quite easy to take a story like that, which is clearly unrealistic in the sense of who's going to, no one's born like that and ages backwards, and to sort of lose the sort of the heartfelt nature of it. It's easy to sort of go, well, we know this isn't real, so we can make a joke of it, or we can make it a bit too science fictiony. They made it as naturalistic as they could to the point where I actually thought, bloody hell, did that actually happen? Like, has that happened to someone? Of course it hasn't. But the way that it was told was believable, was raw, and just incredible. And you're watching the life of this man. Um, I believe it's Dalgleish. I think I've got it written. You have to forget John Dalgleish.
Yeah.
Was beautifully portraying Benjamin Button, John Dalgleish, and you're watching his life from start to finish, albeit in reverse, but you're living his life through him. You're feeling those moments where he falls in love for the first time. You're feeling those moments where he has his first child. You're feeling his moments of regret, of joy, of sadness, of everything because of the way that it's shown on the stage. It's helped on by the music that is, as I say, ever present on the stage, even if it's just sort of the actors are talking and there's just an actor in the background who's just playing like an undertone on the violin or something. It's just subtle. Might not even be a song, but it's there. Um, it's just incredible. Um, It might sound quite similar, I think, to the other ones on the list in 3 and 4 with Little Big Things
Yeah.
and Next to Normal. And I think, like how you mentioned with your top three, on another day they might change around in the order. But I do think particularly the actor musician part of it just made it that extra bit special. You're watching such talented people on this stage tell such a unique story, and again, as I say, one that feels so real, even though it isn't. You feel like you are living this life with Benjamin, and then with his subsequent wife and his kids and stuff who are going through this pain, and you're there going, I feel that as well, and it's just incredible, so well written, so well performed, um, and I hope it stays in the West End for many years to come.
Absolutely, yeah. It's as you said, any given day these can move, and I am absolutely gutted of what I've got to give my number two to now because it's even when you were speaking, I was literally debating it, but I'm gonna stick to my gut because I've got a lot to say on the number one. So, two, when you hear it again, is a horror film that is made for me. This is called Stop Motion, and this is an absolutely incredible delve into how an artistic mindset can actually be someone's worst downfall. This is a stop motion artist. So she's played by Ailing Van Croyce. I might have butchered that name, but she's been in films like The Nightingale. She was also in a film I watched last year, The Last Voyage of the Demeter. But she's a stop motion artist who's trying to finish a film that her and her mother have been working on. Her mother gets hospitalized at the start of the film, but it's essentially you're watching Ella's journey into making the best stop motion art that she can. And we actually see a lot of stop motion animation that's interweaved throughout the film. This is directed by someone who's actually a very big professional of stop motion, Robert Morgan. He's done a lot of shorts on YouTube that are some of the most twisted and wacky stuff I've ever seen. But it was almost, I think it's the idea for this spawned out of his idea that he struggled to come up with an idea for one of his shorts and he wanted to see how he could make it into a feature of someone else struggling. And it is disturbing as anything with because it's actually got quite a bit of body horror. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the final act because that just goes off the chain insane. But I loved it so much because it appealed to me as a creative so much of what it means to get so lost in a project, accomplishing very little. The
Mm.
sense of artistic block that was stunningly well conveyed. There was the performance keeps you on a leash as to going what. I mean, the whole film really keeps you on that leash of going where the head is this going, and boy, it goes to a dark place at the end. But it was yeah, it was written by Bob Morgan as well. It looks fantastic. The actual stop motion work is like it's just like watching a very eloquent tapestry play out because it is so nice to watch great stop motion art, but it's also so horrifying to watch with how the stop motion is actually used. Like they do this really inventive try to make the characters in the stop motion world look as horrified as they can. Oh,
Right.
it's absolutely brilliant. It's very playful. It mostly takes place in the apartment of where she's designing the animation. But as a fellow creative, I can relate to some of the themes here. And I've never seen a horror film about stop motion, so originality it gets goes straight to the top of the ladder.
Mm.
Uh, Absolutely loved it. I haven't rewatched it at all this year. Like, well, last year, sorry, but I mean it's on my list now to rewatch because it is it's just it's one of a kind actually I would say it's brilliant it's horrifying in the best possible way but also I sometimes find body horror a bit over the top but the body horror in this actually did make me squirm and I was literally questioning my fears. I was just there like I won't repeat the language I use because it is a bit inappropriate but
Oh,
I did yell out loud. Yeah, but it was just it's remarkable. It's in the same way as Monolith, it's Monolith appeals to me because I'm a podcaster. Stop motion appeals to me because I'm a creative. So that is the best way of getting those picks in there.
Yeah.
Just brilliant, brilliant storytelling in both forms. Absolutely loved it.
You've got me hooked as well.
Yeah,
That sounds a good watch. Oh,
absolutely.
real.
Do you want to go for your number one then? This is
Time
the
for the big one.
yeah.
Um, anyone that knows me knows I couldn't have done any other show. It is another show that uh,
That's
does
it.
also have a film. It's a
On.
film that you've probably heard of and may well have seen. It's Operation Mincemeat.
Okay, yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, same sort of title as the film with Colin Firth, and it's essentially the same story. It's based on the true story about an operation in World War Two called Operation Mincemeat that helped the Allies win the war. To put it sort of as bluntly as possible. Um, what I particularly love about this show, about the musical version of it, is um, the film is obviously quite a not sort of dark in comparison to maybe a lot of other dark films, but it's certainly not light-hearted. But let's put it that way. And the sort of subject matter isn't particularly light, so it makes sense. It's about World War Two. It's this serious operation. Um, the way it's written as a show is one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Um, which already doesn't, is a complete contrast to what it should be, but it works. And yet at the same time, there are some moments that are so they're written in a way that you could have just laughed your head off for 10 minutes straight, and yet all of a sudden you're brought back into this world, and then it's serious, and you're connecting to these characters on a emotional level, and you find yourself going, "Oh Christ, I'm crying!" all of a sudden. Um, Beautifully written. The team that wrote it are a team called Spitlip. This is definitely their magnum opus. It's since received a run on Broadway. It hasn't opened yet, but they've managed to get it to Broadway. Um, it is, factually speaking, it is the most. I need to word this right. It's the most. It's the show that's had the most 5-star reviews in West End history. It's had
Wow.
over 65, I believe, 5-star reviews. It's broken all sorts of records. It won the Olivier Award for Best New Musical a couple of years ago. Jack Malone won Best Actor in a Musical in the same year, the Olivier Award, and deservedly so, and likewise at the show. It's sort of part Mel Brooks with sort of elements of the producers. It's sort of bits of Hamilton, if you've seen Hamilton. It sort of has a little bit of everything so that everyone can enjoy it. Um, Musically, it's brilliant. It's hilarious. The lyrics of the songs are so funny and so well written. It's just 5 actors on the stage. They multi-role play. That each of them have like 20 characters. Sometimes it's a case of just quickly putting on a hat. Sometimes they're completely changing their clothes, and it all happens so quickly.
Wow.
Um, it's just brilliant, and I've already booked to see it again for like the 6th time. I've lost count, 6th or 7th, I don't know. But I'm seeing it very, very soon. It's just brilliant. There's a particular song in it called "Dear Beale," which is a I don't know how to word it, gorgeously written musical theatre song. It's so simple. It's essentially just a woman. It's a man playing a female role in one of the sort of multi roles that he plays. In Jack Malone, this is who won the Olivier, and he's playing this woman who is just it's just her writing a letter. Someone's gone off to war and she's writing a letter to him. That's it. That the whole song is just that letter. It's a simple premise. It's nothing too over the top. There's no sort of loads of instruments everywhere. It's not colourful, flamboyant. It's simple but beautiful. And then equally on the complete other end of it, there are some songs that are so over the top and so like, oh, it's musical theatre, pow, 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 hilarious, hilarious. Um, and yet in both of those, you're not sort of going, that was really funny. Didn't need that song. It was too sad. Equally, you're not going, that was a really nice song. It tugged at my heartstrings. Why have you gone over the top with that? No, it all works together. It's a beautiful blend of bizarreness, is how I describe it. And it is a show that shouldn't be leaving the West End anytime soon. It just keeps extending and extending, and that's a testament solely to the show. and the team behind it. Excuse me. Definitely my number one pick. I don't think anything was ever going to take that off the number one spot because I've seen it numerous times already, and it's just perfect in my opinion. And
Yeah.
you mentioned about films that were made for you. I would argue this is a show that was made for me. Um,
I,
that's it.
I love that. Love that answer. Yeah, 'cause I've seen the Operation Mincemeat film, but I'm, I mean, presumably the changes, obviously, with the comedic tone it brought on stage, didn't actually have any detriment to it. Then, yeah, I mean,
It's. I'd argue it makes it better, which is
I,
no
th- I,
disrespect to
yeah,
the film. It's a great film.
I think the film was lacking something for me, and maybe that's what the musical needed.
Perhaps it certainly gives it a bit of oomph. But the film's great, but the show is just incredible. It just works. If you want something funny, go watch the show. If you want something that's a bit sort of tugs at heartstrings, go see the show. If you want a bit of both, go see. Yeah, it's perfect for everyone. As I say, it's got elements of different shows and different writers from over the years, so it's got a real mix for
Uh,
everyone. It's just perfect. I
yeah,
loved it.
that sold me. That sold me. Who do you do? Do you think it's going to get a UK tour so I could actually?
Potentially, but as I say, even if it doesn't, I'm anticipating it to being on the West End for years and years to come.
Wow.
You are able to get yourself down to London, that is a show. Tickets are hard to come by even still, but if you are able to get tickets, I can't recommend it enough. But hope I mean, excuse me, it's a show that I think would do well if it toured. So hopefully, fingers crossed, in years to come, maybe.
Pop that on my London trip.
Mm,
Must see.
there you
So
go.
I, I was wrestling with this for a while because I actually only saw this film very well last month in December. One of the last films I watched for 2024. And in the same way you said Operation Mincemeat offers a little bit of everything almost. I'm going to argue this film does exactly the same thing, which has really been interesting because the parallels we've spoken about very different things, but
Mm.
we've had similar threads we've pulled. So my number one is a romantic dark comedy horror movie called Your Monster, and this is yeah, I see the eyes. You ain't got a clue what I'm talking about, so I gotta set it. So this is it stars Melissa Barrera, who you probably best know for she was in the new Scream movies. To me, this is the biggest slap in the face to this power man who fired her of saying, "I'm here, I mean business." So Your Monster, let's set this up. It's essentially she plays this actress, Laura Franco, who she gets this life-changing cancer diagnosis. So her life falls apart. She moves back to her old childhood home, but when she moves back to her childhood home, she meets this monster figure in her closet. It's almost like I would compare it to Chris and the Evil Monkey in Family Guy, almost.
Right.
And it's believe you me when I say it is absolutely a stunning piece of work because it's about overcoming your inner rage. Because the monster acts as almost as a embodiment of what her inner rage represents. Almost the relationship. Because I initially read the premise for this and I thought, how is this even going to work? It is one of the most joyous, life-affirming things I've seen for all of last year. The chemistry is off the charts insane because they're two very similar. They've got two very similar interests. They've both got rage they've brought to the table, and she also the actress goes to audition for a play she actually wrote with her husband and just gets ousted immediately. So has a lot to say on toxicity of relationships, letting your inner rage speak for itself, standing up for yourself. I mean, some of her monologues she gets in this are like you silence really, you stunned in silence just by how good they are. I'll speak a bit more about the technical aspect because this is directed and written by Caroline Lindy. It's also based off a short film. I could not believe the budget of this film. I googled it. It was $300,000, and I was like, "You having a giraffe at that?" in the best possible way because it's if you want if you like go for the genre thing, if you want a bit of comedy, I mean it is wacky and off the charts insane with the inner rage comments. But if you want a bit of seriousness, it comments on toxicity in relationships. It comments on almost a relationship breakdown. I mean, the actual actor who plays the monster, I'll just get his name up, Tommy Dewey, who plays the monster. The amount of emotions you feel from that monster is baffling. I mean, and what I really love about the ending is it turns into almost like this Broadway musical where Melissa Barrera gets a song to sing, basically the biggest way of saying "screw you" to the husband and standing up for herself. And it's called My Stranger, and it is. I've actually listened to it a few times. It is just. I didn't know she could sing originally, but hearing her voice was like I was just mesmerized by it. And this is it's a film. I think it best reflects number one because it's got something in it for everyone. It's actually a very simple story about toxic relationships and almost letting your inner rage explode, but it's also a comeback story. At the same time, it's so hopeful. It's going to appeal to I think, a very wide audience. I think if it ever gets out there, but I absolutely love this film. It's the relationship is just there were so many moments I just went to what was being said. I was like, it was bringing out my soft side, my inner soft side, but it's staggering how good this film is because I went into it thinking it sounded a bit like I don't know if you've heard of If, the film about the
Yeah,
imaginary
yeah,
friend.
yeah.
It sounded a bit like that, and obviously I mentioned Family Guy. I thought, what are they going to do with this gimmick, and is it going to run its course very quickly? It's 90 minutes, and it is one of the most uplifting tales I have seen for all of last year. It was just like I, even now I can't quite believe it exists. To be honest, I mean, $300,000. It looks better than some of the absolute monstrosities Marvel have been putting out. So I had to get that in. Timothy Williams composed and the Lasers did the songs. Just when you listen to the songs again on the soundtrack, it's so you can just visualize them perfectly. It's not take too much money. I've had a look at it, but I think for her career more than anything, Melissa Barrera's, it's put her on track as I'd say maybe might be the best screen queen in Hollywood right now. She's her ability to command a horror film is one thing, but to bring that amount of emotionality and depth in such a short amount of time was just stunning. It was about 98 minutes, but absolutely flew by, and I have not stopped thinking about it since I first thought of the idea for the podcast. But it was always going to be the number one gem of the year.
Real.
It was always I don't yeah. It's a bit of competition with stop motion and monolith, but I was like,
Yeah.
nah, it was always going to be. I had too much to say. I think it deserves every award it can get, to be honest. I mean, like working with limited budget and producing that impact of a final film, I couldn't believe it. I was believed in all the characters more than anything, which is probably what you need in
Mm.
something like this. I mean, the husband, you've got to make him unlikable, and they do a very good job of making him unlikable. But it's just a phenomenal piece of work, phenomenal,
Oh wow.
and that concludes the top 10 part one special. We got there, mate.
Yes, we did, and some really good
Yeah,
shouts. You've got me. You got me hooked to watch some of them. Lee in particular, more so just because I've been meaning to watch it anyway. But Dee Dee sounded good. Monolith was quite an interesting one as well.
yeah. Monolith's a really good one. Yeah, I think that's a good conversation starter. That well, all of them
And
are.
the
Let's be
stop motion
honest.
as well sounds quite unique as well. I quite like the sound of that.
Yeah, yeah. You've really convinced me to watch Operation Mincemeat.
Well, it's a very good show.
Very good
Very.
argument for that, and yeah. But I will say, no, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate.
Likewise, pleasure being here. Thank you very much for having me, and very sorry again for the cough. I do apologise profusely.
I look forward to the next episode, which will be my actual top 10 of the year.
Mhm.
When you're picking for 205 films, God, that was a hard list, I tell you that for a fact.
I don't envy you. Well, I'm
Who
sure you've
envy?
picked the right ones.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be debated on next week's episode. But until then, I will say, Noah, thank you very much again. It's been a absolute pleasure. I'll definitely be getting you back on at some point
Yeah, for sure.
to
I
do
look
this
forward
again.
to it. Thank you very much.
And I will say to everyone else, take care, and I will see you in the my Matt the Critic's top 10 of the actual year special. So take care, and I will see you all very soon.